Hey there, everybody. Robert Taylor with Wonderscape Creations, continuing on with our Narrative Prose series, specifically with dialogue. So now there have been many people who've asked about how to make it to where dialogue is stated specifically for the player, and it's initiated by the player because dialogue doesn't necessarily allow you to do such a thing. Now, there are a few methods in which you can do it. One of them is obviously uh, a method that can only be utilized if you have all of the right requirements. The other two are the options you have to make if you don't meet those requirements. So the more common method is, and it's what I'll be doing, is when you have companions in your party, NPCs specifically, so that that dialogue can easily be accessed and utilized. Now, that's not always the case, and there are two methods in which you can do it. The other one of them is you can have an invisible ghost NPC that's always following the player. Their role is to be the dialogue that the player themselves say to themselves and things like that. You see instances like that, like in Horizon, the Horizon video games, Zero Dawn and whatnot, where when an enemy, when you get close to an enemy, she'll whisper that they're close, so you're aware. Or when you go into stealth mode and you go into the grasses and she whispers something else. So those kind of things can be done using the ghost and the other method, the method that I'll be teaching. And then the ghost can also be used when there needs to be a whole train of thought, so one node after the other. And you'll see why you can't use the second option for if you need a whole train of thought to be played out. So, what we will be doing is there's my NPC right there. Obviously, what is she doing here? If I get close again, her again. But if I'm going this way, I'm close enough, it's not triggering. However, her again. Soon as I was looking. So just to make sure, if I come over here, now I get super close. Her again. So I even have it based on the fact that the player needs to be facing in that direction. Uh, that doesn't. The only instance that I'm not going to be covering in this video is if there's something in between you and the player that requires a lot more complex and wow, a lot more complex code, intricate coding. There we go. My mouth wasn't wanting to mouth. Um, that you would need to make sure that you figure out for your game if it's something that you need. So, what we need to do for this method is we need to go to our player controller. So, if you can't remember where it's at, you can always go into your world settings or into the project settings and come back up here to maps and modes, and there's your player controller. You can just hit that to find it, and then open up your player controller. Now, obviously, this is a child of the narrative player controller, so a lot of this you will not be, you won't see this. You'll need to click the blue buttons, the blue words that say to open up the full graph. We need to create something. Now, this isn't the most intricate way of doing it. It's the way that I did it to make it work for this scenario. Me personally, I would actually make an actor component to make things more modular and easier to utilize, and it's certainly something that I will be doing in the future. So when I do that, obviously, again, I will be sharing that code, sharing my methods, and making that a lot easier. The the goal of this series is to make sure that you all understand how to utilize the tools that you have purchased. So, obviously, you open up your graph, there's nothing here. First thing we need to do is go into add, type in sphere, and look for sphere collision. Once you've added that collision, make sure you select it, and we need to set the radius. I've set my radius to 2,000. You can set it to whatever you want. Um, just make sure you know that you've set it. Now, once you've done that, you're going to want to right click on it, add event on, and you'll see in here on component begin overlap. Go ahead and select that. So once you've done that, we can then get started. Now, this narrative character subsystem that we are very familiar with at this point, we're going to pull out. I've hard coded what I was looking for, which was NPC test. Again, this is why having it be modular and a actor component would be great. But again, that's not what we're doing in this. So you'll want to choose your character that you made. I'll go ahead and change it to Frank. I'm going to be looking specifically for Frank this time. Now, obviously, if we're wanting it to be any narrative character component, it'll need to be adapted to, for any NPC or any character. But for this, it works for what we're trying to do. I'm trying to help you guys see how to do it. So this is checking to see whether it's this character specifically. If it is, it allows us to go by, at which point I can set that character because I don't want to have strings going everywhere. Now, to get the trigger effect of only happening when the character sees the NPC, barring something being in front of them, it would still trigger at this point. What we want to do is we need to get the dot product to that NPC. But before that, we need to get our pawn. Now, I chose to get the player state to get the pawn because if you just do get player pawn, you get this index. Get player. If we scroll all the way down here, the only option we have is get player state. Now, by doing it this way, we guarantee that if it's a multiplayer game, we're getting the player state of this game, of the person right now. So we're not having to, we're playing into, ownership instead of having to figure out which player is which. And we're going to drag out of get pawn and then get dot product to. So our target is our pawn. The other actor is the NPC. Now I've chosen 0.95. So here's how it works. If the player is in front of me, if my target is in front of me, this will be a number between 0 and 1. If the target is behind me, it'll be between 0 and -1. So everything between 0 and 1. I put it at 0.95 so that the player has to be more closely looking at that person. Now, it's important to note that it's not the controller itself, it's the pawn itself. So if you want it to be the controller, then you would just do self. That way, when you're pointing it with your pointer, then you could do it that way. But I chose this method for this. Now, if the product value is greater than 0.95, then it passes to true, and it begins some dialogue, which the reason I chose the controller to begin with is the tails component is there. Now, that doesn't mean you have to do that, because I do believe we have get narrative, game mode, game state, get narrative pro settings. There is a tails component somewhere. Oh, see, there are more subsystems. Get tails. There it is. Get tails component. So you can actually get it. Target is narrative player controller anywhere that has access to that narrative player controller. But me wanting to keep things easy, I have it here, and this is exactly where I'll put my actor component once I get to this point. And we'll play the dialogue. But if they're not there, we still want to store this information. So set timer by function name. So what we want to do now is to create a new function. I set mine as C target. We're going to open it up. and create the target, you'll notice that this is exactly the same as what's right here, except it's using our target that we stored right here. Once it's true, it'll play the dialogue and clear the timer. Now that's important because we don't want it to keep trying to play this function every 2 seconds forever. Which is why when we set timer by function, now that we've created our function, name it cTarget, it's going to try the function every 2 seconds. And then I want to create a cTarget timer. Now then, going back into the function to give you guys the opportunity to finish what we had there, it's literally just player state, get pawn, the target, get dot product 2, 0.95 greater, play the dialogue. We're getting ready to make this dialogue. Don't worry. And you'll want to get that dialogue timer and clear and invalidate timer by handle. Now say the player never looks at the that pawn ever. We don't want to keep playing this timer. So you'll want to again come up to the sphere, add event, and look for on component and overlap. And you'll want to clear and invalidate the timer by handle and also clear the target. No reason to store that information at that point. That right there is everything we need to do to make the functionality work. Now, for the dialogue, go ahead and I'm going to open up my notes here. As you can see right here, this is grayed out. If we go to the class defaults, we have no speakers. So it will allow for one-liners. Now this is why one of the options is the ghost type option. Because you need to, if you want it to continue on, you need to actually have a speaker. And if you don't, then you can't do it. So what we need to do is create the this dialogue option. So if you are wanting to have one after the other, that way you can have, they're not just monologuing. There's a couple of seconds in between each line if that's what you're wanting. You'll need to do it the ghost method. You'll need to have an invisible NPC that is just there to store dialogue for you. It's the only real option you have. There is a way that I found for the person that had that ghost struggle there, but I would recommend you go to the Discord to take a look at that, because I'm not showing that because I don't like it. The more I played with it, the more I didn't like that option. So we're going to go ahead and create our own one-offs here. So we need to go into our content browser, and I'm going to make a folder called players, just in case there's multiplayer. And then new folder, dialogue. Now we're going to come in here to narrative dialogue, and we'll call it dialogue player. I'm going to open it up, drag out, add player response, and in the text, hey, it's Baldy. I know, I probably spelled that wrong. Don't care at the moment. And then he always makes me chuckle. Put in the condition of as played node, the options. I'm running low on time at the moment, so I'm not going to rename that one. Options. There we go. Compile and save. So now we'll come in here, and I'm going to change this to, I'm going to look for player, look for my dialogue player. I named it that way so it's easier for me to find. Stay true to how you've chosen to name things. And look for player again. Okay. Now everything's set. And this is why I want to make my own component, make things modular, so I'm not having to change it in multiple locations. So now, in theory, this should work once we get close enough. So let's go ahead and hit play. Give it a minute to start. Now, once we get close enough, hey, it's Baldi. But I forgot about something. We need to come in here, not playtest. Now you know why it's important. The class defaults to free movement. Compile, save. Let's try again. Hey, it's Baldi. Now if I do it again. Interesting. Is it from bottom to top? Oh, that's why. You got to make sure that the condition stuff is up at the top. You have to. I forgot. If you're going to go that direction, it's got to be from top to bottom. If you're going the default way, it's left to right. So, hey, it's Baldi. All right. 1 second. All right, so the only problem was I didn't hit compile. I just saved it. You still, if you move these around, you need to compile and save. Otherwise, it's not going to compile it how it should. So now, learn something new. It wasn't showing the needs to compile, so I didn't do it. Hey, it's Baldi. He always makes me chuckle. So there we go. That's how you can make the player do it. Again, I would recommend making an actual actor component and attaching it and make everything modular so that it's not stuck to just this one character. But now you know how to make it work. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next episode when we go over tagged dialogue.